There are shadows, even now. Not the kind that cling to corners of old Boston brownstones, though those hold their own quiet mysteries. No, these are shadows in my mind, ghost whispers of what I once believed to be true, of a life meticulously built, only to be systematically dismantled. It feels like a lifetime ago, though the scars still ache with a phantom limb sensation, a constant reminder of what was severed. I was Arthur Vance then. Still am, I suppose. But the Arthur who walked the hallowed halls of that university, the Arthur who dreamed of curating a landmark exhibition on pre-war American art, that Arthur is gone. He was murdered, in a way, by the very person I entrusted with my heart, my life, my future. I was 45, a professor of art history, completely immersed in my work. My world revolved around dusty archives, forgotten artists, and the quiet thrill of unearthing connections no one else had seen. It was a beautiful, singular passion, one that most people, Lena included, called charming or endearing from a distance. Up close, it could be demanding, consuming. But I loved it. I loved the meticulous nature of research, the patient assembly of facts, the slow, satisfying reveal of a story told through paint and canvas. My dream, my life's ambition, was to curate an exhibition that would shed new light on a particular, overlooked period of American art, to bring these forgotten voices back into the conversation. 5 years I'd poured into it, every spare moment, every thought, every scrap of intellectual energy. My magnum opus, I called it in my head. Lena came into my life like a burst of color in an otherwise muted palette. I met her at a university gallery opening, an event I usually attended out of obligation, a necessary social evil. She was a gallery owner herself, younger than me, vibrant, with a laugh that echoed through the room and drew every eye. She spoke of art with a passionate intensity that mirrored my own, but hers was a world of commerce, of grand openings and influential patrons, a stark contrast to my quiet academic pursuits. She was charisma personified, a whirlwind of energy and charm that swept me off my feet. I, a man accustomed to the solitude of libraries, found myself utterly captivated. She saw something in me, she said, a depth, a quiet strength, a brilliant mind hidden beneath tweed jackets. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. Our courtship was exhilarating. She brought me out of my shell, introduced me to a world beyond campus, a world of glittering receptions and high-stakes art deals. She was always so encouraging, so full of belief in my work, in my genius. Arthur, she'd say, her hand warm on my arm, her eyes sparkling, your mind is a treasure. The world needs to see what you see. She talked about our future, our shared passion for art, how we would be a power couple in the Boston art scene, the brilliant academic and the savvy gallerist. It was intoxicating. I had never felt so seen, so valued, so loved. Any small quirks, any instances where her ambition seemed to eclipse everything else, I dismissed. She was just driven, I told myself. A force of nature. That's what I loved about her. She made me feel alive in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. The first whispers of unease were so subtle, like a shift in the wind before a storm you don't yet recognize. They began in my professional life, small disruptions that I initially blamed on myself, on the natural chaos of a busy academic schedule. My grant applications, for example. I'd spent months meticulously crafting proposals for funding my research, the very research that would eventually form the backbone of my exhibition. They were strong, innovative, backed by years of preliminary work. Yet, one by one, they started coming back rejected. The reasons were vague, boilerplate language about alignment with institutional priorities or competitive applicant pools. I'd never had this kind of trouble before. I remember the gnawing pit in my stomach as I opened the third rejection letter, the ink bleeding slightly from where my thumb had unconsciously rubbed the paper. Was I losing my touch? Was my work no longer relevant? Then came the disappearing acts. Not people, but my research. My meticulously organized notes, cross-referenced articles, printouts of rare photographs. They would simply vanish. I'd spend hours, frantic, tearing my office apart, convinced I'd misplaced them. My notes, written in my precise hand, filled with personal annotations, were my lifeblood. I'd find them later, sometimes tucked away in a drawer I swore I'd checked, or even worse, mixed in with other, unrelated files, as if someone had deliberately shuffled them. I remember one particular Saturday, spent tearing through my study for a crucial set of provenance notes I needed for a lecture on Monday. The panic was a cold claw in my chest. Lena found me, knees aching, surrounded by scattered papers. She knelt beside me, her voice soft, reassuring. Arthur, darling, you're so overwhelmed. You must have just put them somewhere you thought was clever at the time. She helped me look, for a while, offering gentle suggestions, and eventually, there they were, neatly stacked under a pile of old journals on a shelf I was certain I'd already cleared. I felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly buckled me, followed by profound self-reproach. How could I be so careless? The misremembering started next. I'd miss meetings, important faculty discussions, even a couple of scheduled talks with visiting scholars. My calendar, which I prided myself on keeping impeccable, would show no entry. Yet, my colleagues would look at me with concern, saying they'd sent me multiple reminders. The embarrassment was excruciating. I felt a flush creep up my neck every time. I started double-checking, triple-checking, adding every appointment to my phone, my physical planner, even leaving myself handwritten notes on the refrigerator. But sometimes, they still slipped through my fingers like water. Lena, ever the comforting presence, would soothe my frayed nerves. It's just the stress, Arthur. You're working so hard. Your mind is in 1,000 places at once. And you're not getting any younger, are you? She'd say it with a playful smile, a touch to my cheek, but the words sank in, each one a tiny stone added to the growing weight of self-doubt. My academic absent-mindedness, she called it. A charming flaw, she'd assure me, but a flaw nonetheless. I started to internalize her dismissals. The grants, the missing notes, the forgotten appointments. They weren't signs of a conspiracy, I told myself. They were signs of my decline. My meticulous research, once my greatest strength, now felt like an exercise in futility. I started second-guessing every detail, every fact. My colleagues noticed, I think. They'd ask if I was all right, if I was sleeping enough. I'd offer vague reassurances, but inside, I was crumbling. The vivacious, curious Arthur was being replaced by a withdrawn, anxious shell. My passion for art, once a vibrant flame, flickered precariously, overshadowed by a pervasive sense of inadequacy. I questioned my very ability to be a curator, to lead an exhibition. How could I, if I couldn't even keep my own notes in order or remember an important meeting? Lena was always there, offering comfort, a cup of tea, a gentle massage for my tense shoulders. Just rest, my love, she'd whisper. You deserve it. Let others worry about the small things. And I listened. I retreated further, clinging to her words as my anchor in a sea of confusion. The pressure mounted, a slow, insistent turn of a screw. Lena seemed to become even more attentive, more outwardly supportive, as my professional life subtly unraveled. She would often help me organize my study, her movements efficient and confident among my chaotic papers. Oh, Arthur, you're such a lovely mess, she'd coo, sometimes holding up a stack of documents I'd been searching for, looking at me with an indulgent smile. These were right here, under this book. You really need a better system. I'd nod, embarrassed, and thank her, feeling even more incapable. She became my external memory, my personal assistant, reminding me of appointments, finding things I'd lost, all while reinforcing the narrative that I was becoming forgetful, disorganized, and increasingly unreliable. One particularly vivid memory stands out, a moment of acute gaslighting that, at the time, felt like a genuine lapse in my own sanity. I had submitted a paper to a prestigious journal, a crucial step in cementing my expertise for the exhibition I still hoped to stage. The editor, a longtime acquaintance, called me to discuss a specific historical point, a relatively minor detail, but one I knew I had thoroughly sourced. He was polite but firm, stating I had presented a particular artist's birth date incorrectly in the manuscript. I vehemently disagreed. I remembered checking it multiple times, cross-referencing primary sources. I argued, growing agitated, feeling a rising sense of indignation. But then, Lena, who happened to be in the room, gently interjected. Arthur, darling, are you certain? You know how sometimes you get your dates mixed up when you're deeply engrossed. Remember that time with the post-impressionist period? She laughed lightly, a beautiful, melodious sound, but her words felt like a physical slap. The editor, hearing her, paused, then subtly shifted his tone, implying perhaps I should review my notes again before resubmitting. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. She's right. I mumbled, my voice barely audible. She's right. I must be losing it. Lena came over, wrapped her arms around me, burying my face in her shoulder. It's okay, my love. Everyone makes mistakes. It's just a sign you need a little break. I felt utterly defeated, like a crucial piece of my intellectual foundation had cracked. I apologized to the editor, edited the paper, and swallowed my pride. I was certain she was wrong, even as I doubted my own certainty. The conflict between my internal knowledge and the external pressure, amplified by Lena, was a constant, debilitating hum. I started retreating into myself, isolating from friends and colleagues, ashamed of my perceived failings. My sleep became fractured, haunted by fragmented thoughts of forgotten deadlines and misfiled documents. I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart hammering, convinced I'd forgotten something vital, some piece of my research. My appetite dwindled. I started losing weight, my suits hanging looser, emphasizing the gauntness that was creeping into my face. The mirror reflected a stranger, a pale, anxious man with shadows under his eyes. I truly believed I was losing my mind, my sharpness, my ability to function in the academic world. I even started to consider early retirement, a quiet life tending to a garden, far from the intellectual demands that now felt like an impossible burden. Lena listened patiently when I tentatively brought it up, her eyes full of what I believed was concern. "Whatever makes you happy, Arthur," she'd say, stroking my hair. "Your peace is all that matters to me." Her words, meant to comfort, now echo with a chilling emptiness. The air that night was electric, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the clinking of champagne flutes. It was Lena's night, a critical gallery opening she had been planning for months. The space was packed with Boston's art elite, the kind of people Lena cultivated with effortless charm. I was there, of course, dutifully playing the part of the supportive academic husband, though I felt increasingly like a shadow, an irrelevant appendage to her glittering world. I was tired, worn down by the constant self-doubt, barely making conversation, my mind still reeling from a lost draft of a lecture I was supposed to give next week. Lena had simply shrugged and said, "You probably just deleted it by accident, honey. You've been so distracted lately." I found myself drifting towards a quieter corner, near a large, abstract sculpture, trying to escape the din. That's when I heard it. Lena's voice, clear and resonant, carrying over the murmur of the crowd. She was standing a few feet away, her back to me, engaged in animated conversation with another prominent curator, Dr. Eleanor Vance, no relation, thankfully, from a rival institution. Lena's laugh tinkled through the air, and then her words, confident and utterly poised. "And so, my upcoming exhibition, Forgotten Voices, the Unseen Art of Pre-War America, will truly revolutionize how we understand that period. I've been researching it for years, uncovering entirely new perspectives." My blood ran cold. The clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation, all faded into a distant thrum. Forgotten Voices, the Unseen Art of Pre-War America. The name, the theme, the very historical period, it was mine. My magnum opus. The 5 years of my life. My heart began to pound a frantic, irregular rhythm against my ribs. I felt a dizzying surge of disbelief, followed by a searing, white-hot anger that stole my breath. It couldn't be. Surely, it was a coincidence. A shared interest, perhaps. I tried to calm myself, to rationalize, but the panic was already a tightening band around my chest. Then, Lena turned slightly, gesturing emphatically as she spoke, and I saw it. Dr. Vance held a slim, leather-bound notebook in her hands. Lena reached out, took it, and casually flipped it open, pointing to something inside. My vision narrowed. The notebook. It was my notebook. My distinctive handwriting, the specific blue ink I always used, the marginalia, the little sketches of forgotten artists' signatures. My notes. The notes I had sworn had gone missing months ago, the ones Lena had helped me search for, the ones that had led me to believe I was losing my mind. I couldn't breathe. The air in the opulent gallery suddenly felt thin, toxic. I watched, frozen, as Lena continued to discuss the exhibit, gesturing to the notebook as if it were an extension of her own brilliant mind. She pointed to a page, a detailed analysis of a regionalist painter I had unearthed, a cornerstone of my research. Dr. Vance nodded, impressed, taking a sip of champagne. Then, Lena, with a dismissive flick of her wrist, produced a few loose papers from a folder she held. And these are some of the initial collaboration documents, she said, her voice dripping with casual authority. Just outlining the early stages of the intellectual property. She handed them to Dr. Vance, who glanced at them briefly. I felt a sudden, desperate urge to flee, to be anywhere but there, but my feet were cemented to the polished floor. I forced myself to move, inching closer, pretending to examine the abstract sculpture, my eyes fixed on the documents in Dr. Vance's hand. She turned the page, and I saw it. A faint watermark, almost invisible, but I knew it. It was my university's logo. And then, the names. Lena Vance, listed prominently as the primary investigator. And below it, in a slightly smaller, almost obscured font, another name. My name, Arthur Vance. Except it wasn't. It was A. Vance. A subtle misspelling, just enough to distance it, to make it plausible deniability. Or, on another page, my name was entirely absent, replaced with a generic research assistant. The world tilted. The lights of the gallery blurred into a kaleidoscopic smear. It hit me then, a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole all the air from my lungs. Every missing note, every rejected grant, every forgotten meeting, every time Lena had soothed me, told me I was stressed, or aging, or absent-minded. It wasn't me. It was her. She had orchestrated it all. Systematically, meticulously, she had sabotaged my career, undermined my sanity, to steal my life's work. Not just for success, but to utterly erase my contribution, to replace my legacy with her own. The realization was a cold, hard stone in my chest, a monstrous, grotesque truth that swallowed everything I thought I knew. My brilliant, charming wife, the woman who loved me, who supported me, was a thief, a betrayer, a predator. And I, the meticulous scholar, had been her unsuspecting, trusting prey. I don't remember leaving the gallery. My memory of those moments is a fractured kaleidoscope of images and sensations. The roar of blood in my ears, the sudden chill despite the warmth of the room, the scent of expensive wine turning acrid in my throat. I stumbled out into the cool Boston night, the cacophony of the city a dull throb against the ringing in my head. I walked, aimlessly, for hours, the image of my name, misspelled, erased, burned into my mind. Each step felt heavy, like dragging lead weights. My body ached, a deep, pervasive weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. The emotional collapse was absolute. I found myself on a park bench, the cold metal seeping through my thin suit trousers, staring at the black canvas of the sky. The stars, usually a source of comfort, seemed indifferent, cold. Tears came then, not the slow, quiet kind, but harsh, guttural sobs that ripped through my chest. It wasn't just the theft of my work, it was the theft of myself, my dignity, my very perception of reality. Every kind word she had ever uttered, every loving touch, every moment of supposed comfort, now replayed in my mind like a horror film, tinged with a grotesque irony. Her reassuring hand on my shoulder as I frantically searched for notes. Her gentle smile as she told me I was just stressed. It was all a performance, a cruel, elaborate deception designed to disarm, to weaken, to ultimately destroy. I had loved her. I had trusted her. I had allowed her to convince me I was losing my mind. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute. It felt like a part of my soul had been ripped out. I stayed there until dawn, numb and hollowed out. As the first pale light of morning touched the sky, something shifted within me. The despair, though still a heavy shroud, began to give way to a different, colder emotion, clarity. The fog of self-doubt that had clung to me for so long began to lift, revealing the stark, undeniable truth. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't absent-minded. I had been gaslighted, manipulated, and systematically undermined. The realization was an awakening, a painful, brutal rebirth. It wasn't liberation yet, not fully, but it was the first breath of clean air after suffocating for so long. The anger came next, a quiet, simmering rage that gave me an unexpected strength. I would not let her get away with it. I would not let her erase me. The meticulously organized mind that had been my pride, that she had tried to shatter, began to reassert itself. I started to piece together the fragments, connecting the dots of her deception. Every lost document, every forgotten meeting, every vague grant rejection. It all made horrifying sense. My first steps were cautious, almost furtive. I couldn't face her yet, not with this raw, exposed wound. I went back to our brownstone when I knew she would be out and moved with a cold, surgical precision. I started gathering evidence. I found old emails, copies of my original grant applications, digital backups of my research notes I'd forgotten I made, meticulously dated and time-stamped. I even found a draft of one of those collaboration documents she had shown Dr. Vance, hidden in a folder on her computer labeled Gallery Logistics. The original version still had my full name, spelled correctly. It was a digital ghost, a breadcrumb she had carelessly left behind. The physical evidence of my stolen notes was trickier, but I remembered the distinct watermark of my university's paper. I started looking for every scrap of paper with that watermark, comparing it to her work. The more I found, the more damning the picture became. The meticulousness that had always defined me, the very quality she tried to portray as a flaw, became my weapon. The confrontation with Lena was not the dramatic explosion I might have imagined in my more emotional moments. It was cold, clinical, and utterly devoid of anything resembling remorse from her side. I waited until she came home, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across our living room. I laid out my evidence on the coffee table, the dated printouts of my original research, the rejected grant applications, the email correspondence that showed my unique proposals, and finally, the damning collaboration documents, comparing her version with my original. Lena, I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. We need to talk. She walked in, vibrant and self-assured as always, her eyes flicking over the scattered papers. A slight frown creased her brow, a flicker of irritation. Arthur, what is this mess? I've had a draining day. Can't this wait? No, I replied, it can't. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a stranger. The mask of warmth and affection had slipped. You stole my work. You sabotaged my career. You gaslight me into believing I was losing my mind. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, a slow smile spread across her face, not kind, but chillingly detached. Oh, Arthur, she said, her voice laced with an almost pitying amusement. You really are so naive, aren't you? Always lost in your books, completely oblivious to how the real world works. She picked up one of my original research printouts, glanced at it, and tossed it back onto the table. Yes, I used some of your ideas. We're married, Arthur. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. It's called collaboration. And honestly, your slow, academic pace would have taken years to get this exhibition off the ground. I simply expedited things. Expedited. I retorted, my voice rising. You forged documents. You actively undermined my applications. You made me doubt my own sanity. She laughed then, a sharp, unfeeling sound. And you fell for it, didn't you? So easily. Honestly, Arthur, you were so busy feeling sorry for yourself, so wrapped up in your little tragedies, it was almost too easy. A shame, really. You have talent, I suppose, in your own quaint way. But you lack ambition. The fire. I have that, and I know how to use it. She tilted her head, her eyes glittering. What are you going to do, Arthur? Tell everyone? Who would believe a rambling, forgetful professor over a respected gallery owner? Her words, intended to wound, instead solidified my resolve. Her utter lack of remorse, her disdain, her casual cruelty, it was a definitive confirmation. The woman I had loved was truly gone, if she had ever existed at all. The lawsuit was brutal, a long, drawn-out, public spectacle that tore through our lives, leaving a trail of wreckage. It cost me everything, my marriage, much of my savings, and for a time, my reputation. The university, caught in the crossfire, put me on indefinite leave. Lena, with her connections and her practiced charm, fought tooth and nail, spinning tales of a jealous, disgruntled husband, of creative differences, of my alleged mental instability. But I had my evidence, meticulously compiled, damning in its detail. And I had my story, clear and undeniable, bolstered by old colleagues who remembered my early, enthusiastic presentations of the forgotten voices concept. The trial became a battle of narratives. Hers, of a bold, visionary gallerist. Mine, of a meticulous scholar betrayed. Eventually, the truth, undeniable in its paper trail and digital timestamps, won out. The judgment was in my favor. Lena's career was dismantled. Her gallery, once a beacon of the Boston art scene, crumbled under the weight of scandal and lawsuits. Her reputation was irrevocably tarnished. It was a victory, yes, but a hollow one, steeped in loss. I was free, but I felt like a war veteran returning to a ghost town, surrounded by the ruins of my former life. I didn't get my old job back immediately. The university preferred to distance itself from the scandal. I spent months in a quiet, isolated limbo, licking my wounds. The healing process was slow, arduous. I saw a therapist, slowly unraveling the layers of psychological damage, learning to trust my own perceptions again. The self-doubt still surfaced, like an old scar that aches in humid weather, but now I had the tools to push it back. I started to rediscover the quiet joy of art, not as a career path, but as a balm for my battered soul. I visited museums, galleries, not with an agenda, but with an open heart, letting the beauty wash over me. One crisp autumn morning, staring at a blank screen, a familiar urge stirred within me. Not the desperate need for validation or a grant, but a pure, unadulterated desire to share what I knew, what I loved. I started a small art blog. The Undermining Curator, I called it, a wry nod to my past, a reclaiming of my narrative. I wrote about pre-war American art, about the forgotten voices, about the meticulous process of uncovering history. I didn't chase fame or fortune. I wrote for the sheer joy of it, for the quiet satisfaction of sharing knowledge, of telling stories that deserve to be heard. I posted my research, my genuine, heartfelt analyses, with no expectation other than to connect with others who shared my passion. Slowly, gradually, people started to read. Other academics, art enthusiasts, even a few former students who remembered my lectures. They commented, they asked questions, they engaged. My confidence, once shattered, began to mend, stitch by careful stitch. The blog became my new platform, my new gallery, unbound by institutional politics or treacherous ambition. It was smaller, yes, humbler, but it was mine, authentically and unequivocally mine. Sometimes, a flicker of anger still surfaces when I think of Lena, of what she did. But it's less consuming now, more distant. The pain has dulled, replaced by a quiet understanding of human frailty and human darkness. I lost a lot, yes. My marriage, my career trajectory, my innocence. But I gained something invaluable, myself. I found my voice again, not as a desperate plea for recognition, but as a resonant expression of my true passion. I learned to trust my own judgment, to value my quiet strength, and to recognize the insidious nature of manipulation. I sit here now, sipping my coffee, the morning light streaming into my study. The familiar scent of old books fills the air. My blog post for the day is almost finished. It's about a forgotten female sculptor, a fierce, independent spirit who carved her own path, despite the obstacles. Her story resonates with me now in a way it never did before. The journey back has been long and arduous, full of dark nights and moments of despair. But I am here. I am whole, in a new, stronger way. The scars remain, a permanent map of where I've been, but they no longer define me. They are just a testament to the fact that I survived. And in finding my authentic voice, in sharing my true passion, I have finally found my peace.